Which wide receivers should you be starting or sitting in week 9 of the fantasy season? We're going game by game to break down all the receivers that matter in fantasy and give you our thoughts. Now, there are some receivers you don't need to worry about. These guys are still must starts. That's Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Keenan Allen. We do have 4 teams on bye in week 9. That's the 49ers, the Lions, the Jaguars, and the Broncos. Let me remind you that if you haven't tried Underdog Fantasy, this is the time to do it because using promo code ENDGAME gets you a 100% deposit match up to $500. And for signing up as a new customer, you can take advantage of this week's special pick'em. Lamar Jackson just needs 1 yard. That's right. You take that pick, go higher. Lamar gets a yard. You win that pick. You can combine it with any other pick, including some of our favorites, which we'll go over in this video. And that gets you a good chance to triple your money just like that. You've already doubled it just from becoming a customer. So check it out. They always have specials going on as well. Underdog Fantasy. Use the link down below and sign up now. First game of the week is the Titans at the Steelers, which is a perfect chance to start talking about DeAndre Hopkins. Coming off a 3-touchdown game, huge performance from him in the first game with Will Levis. So, what are we going to get from Nuck this week?
Probably not 3 touchdowns in 4 catches, but it's not a horrible matchup here. Do got to be a little bit worried about the rookie on the road, the quarterback that is. I'm not going to instantly say like, oh, now you have to start him just because he had that big game. But I think this week, with 4 teams on bye, he's still a good start.
Yeah, I don't think one game can make anybody an auto start. It's Hopkins. I mean, we've seen him do it before. Obviously, he's going to be the number 1 target. He's been the number 1 target. Maybe he just needed a real quarterback. But anyways, look, I know Levis is probably going to have a much harder time this week. But I feel like for the most part, if I have Hopkins, I still want to start him. Now, what about Treylon Burks? It was interesting because he finally came back from injury and didn't catch a single pass. I mean, is this just a working your way back, shaking the rust off thing? Or is there just maybe no connection with him and Levis?
I mean, maybe both, but I mean, the thing is when you're throwing, huge touchdowns to one guy, you don't throw a lot of passes and there's not a lot of, left over for the other guys. But still, I mean, Treylon Burks, way too risky right now. I cannot start him.
Yeah, I still think he's an interesting stash, but there's no way I can start him in week 9. Now let's go to the Steelers. Well, it could be Trubisky time again. Kenny Pickett with a rib injury, so what do we do with George Pickens?
I mean, you probably got to be a little nervous. I mean, he did his 1 catch, his touchdown was from Trubisky, so I guess that's the good news. But the bad news is he only had that 1 catch. It is a good matchup against the Titans, though, so I think for the most part, you're rolling with Pickens again.
I think because of the matchup, we always know Titans secondary. This is pretty much still a funnel defense. They'll give up some big plays. Look, Pickens put up some big plays last year in the first half of the season with Trubisky. He's always 1 play away. He's still a solid wide receiver 3 to me. And then Deontay Johnson, well, he's still maybe not quite 100%, but he looked good and had some fantasy points. Is he trustworthy?
Yeah, I like Deontay Johnson a lot again this week. Liked him last week against the Jags. Another good matchup. 20 targets since he's come back from the hamstring injury. I think Deontay Johnson a very good start this week.
Yeah, I'm also putting him as a solid number 3 receiver in most fantasy teams, maybe even higher. He's going to get targets. Remember, Freiermuth, the tight end, is still out. This team cannot really run the ball very well, so I think Johnson's solid. And the game that could have a lot of fireworks, and it's overseas in Germany, we got the Dolphins at the Chiefs. I know in our minds we expect everybody to go off in this game. In reality, it might not be that way. But let's start with Jalen Waddle. Is he a must-start here?
Yeah, I think in this matchup, coming off a nice game, always has tremendous weekly upside. It should be high scoring. It's overseas, so these games can always get weird. You never know, but should be high scoring. I think for the most part, you're starting Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, pretty much you have to. I mean, this Chiefs defense is better than last year and years past, especially in the secondary. So I'm not going to just assume a huge game from Waddle, but I want to find out with him in my lineup. And then what about Rashee Rice, who is still the number 1 receiver here? I guess pretty much the only receiver we can talk about because nobody else is doing anything. How do you feel about Rice against the Dolphins?
I like him a lot this week. He's gone over 60% of the routes 2 straight weeks. Look, last week, Patrick Mahomes dealing with the flu. You got to throw that game out. I'm not looking at that game. I think he bounces back in a big time in what should be a shootout. This secondary, look, I know Jalen Ramsey is back and he had the interception, but come on, Mac Jones threw that ball right to him. Xavier Howard banged up. I like Rashee Rice this week.
Yeah, like the downside from last week is Rice didn't score, didn't put up a big game against the Broncos, but he's getting more involved, like you said. No other Chiefs receivers really even worth talking about because Rice has been the guy who is now Pat Mahomes' favorite target at receiver. Rice is a solid start for sure. Vikings at the Falcons. This will be an interesting one. Could have two different quarterbacks here. Let's start with Minnesota. Just when Jordan Addison was getting it going, just smashing in his rookie season, no more Kirk Cousins. What does that mean?
I mean, it can't mean good things. Just got to be worried about him. And look, the Falcons, not a great matchup. They're not a terrible defense here. So, look, I know it's going to be hard to bench Jordan Addison. He's been unreal the last 2 weeks. No Justin Jefferson, but for me, more just like a wide receiver 3 this week.
I agree. Not complete must bench, but I think one of the more underrated players in the league is A.J. Terrell, a corner for Atlanta. You've talked about him before. He's been really good, could cover Addison. If there's a rookie quarterback here making his first ever start, very risky. So you could play him, but to me, almost more just like a flex option. And then KJ Osborne, I mean, obviously they can't be good for him, but maybe do you think as kind of the shorter route guy, kind of getting dump offs, do you think he benefits by volume?
I mean, he would need a lot of volume or a touchdown. I'm not starting KJ Osborne this week.
Yeah, I mean, he had good numbers last week, but that was with Kirk Cousins at quarterback, so no, this is too deep. I can't start Osborne. Drake London looked like he might be on his way to a big game as expected, and then he left, hurt with a groin injury, so we'll see if he does suit up this week. Didn't sound like it was serious, though, so if London plays, do you play him?
Yeah, I think you pretty much have to. It's the Vikings. It's a great matchup. I mean, of course, you got to watch the injury reports. Is he, barely practicing? Is he looking limited? If he's full go, though, in this matchup, I think you have to start him.
And I will say, I like the other thing that did happen in that game was Taylor Heineke came in at quarterback. If he's a starter, I think that's better for London. If London plays against Minnesota, a team that could be limited on offense, I'm going to start London. Seahawks taking on the Ravens this week. Well, let's start with DK Metcalf. He was back and didn't put up a big game, but do you think he can get better? Is he a guy you just kind of roll with and see what you get?
Yeah, I'm getting nervous, but I think he's still a guy you just kind of roll with and see what he gives you in most cases.
Yeah, it's hard to really make a case for benching DK Metcalf if he's healthy and playing. Don't feel a smash week here, but he's definitely still startable. On Tyler Lockett, despite being on the injury report last week, played and had a big game. Can he have a big game again?
He always can. He always could have a not big game. I think he's another one of these guys. Unless you have really good options, you're putting him in your lineup and you're taking what you get.
Yep, agree. Hard to predict here, but I will say he's always on that wide receiver 3 radar pretty much every week, regardless of the matchup. And then there's the rookie, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Looking at both the other starting receivers in Seattle are healthy, but he's still at least maintaining some sort of involvement. Is it enough?
I mean, yeah, touchdown 2 straight games, getting involved. Definitely not a guy I think you have to start, but if you need to, you can start him.
There you go. I think this is getting deeper. This is more streaming territory if you got buys, injuries, whatever. But he is definitely an option that has some upside. And then Zay Flowers definitely let me down. Thought it would be a big week. Did almost nothing. Are we going back to seeing the early season Zay where it's like screens and short routes?
Yeah, that's what it looked like last week. That was really weird, but I'm still going to trust him this week. It's a good matchup against the Seahawks. They give up a lot to the wide receivers. Amari Cooper just had a nice day against them, so I'm still, for the most part, starting Zay Flowers.
I think you just need to set some more realistic expectations here. I think he's just a floor play in PPR. The touchdowns aren't there. The big plays aren't there enough. So I'll say he can be flexed, but I'm not expecting a big game. The Rams at the Packers. And then now it's like Puka Nacua, a guy we cannot trust because Matt Stafford has been worse and now he could be injured. Are we considering benching Puka?
I think I still have to roll with Puka Nacua. Obviously, there's some risk here. There's some worry. I'm still playing him if I got him.
Well, I'll say this. If Stafford does not play and we got Brett Rippon there, I mean, we've seen him a little bit in Denver and, spots here and there. It's not been too good. I'm going to say you don't have to start Puka if Stafford is not in there. Now let's talk about Green Bay. Christian Watson, man, what do we do with him?
Not starting him. This whole offense just terrifies me. I want no piece of it. If he happens to go off this week, oh well, I'm not starting him.
I mean, how much longer, right? We're going to keep doing this and keep getting fooled. Let's see it. Let's see it more than once. Let's see Jordan Love look like a decent quarterback. Let's see Christian Watson stay healthy for a consistent stretch and make big plays. I hate to say it, maybe we got fooled by that really small sample size last year where he had a couple games that were big. No, I'm keeping Watson benched. And then Romeo Doubs, I mean, sure, he's scoring touchdowns, but it's like that's all he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, he's touchdown or bust pretty much. Again, I just want to avoid this offense if I can. I'm not starting Doubs.
Well, I'll tell you what, this week I can say just no to Romeo Doubs. I'm going to pass here. Now, Jaden Reed did lead the Packers in receiving last week, but it's still a no for me too.
Yeah, definitely a no here.
Cardinals taking on the Browns. Well, Josh Dobbs' era is over. We'll see what happens there. What if it's Clayton Tune? What does that mean for Hollywood Brown?
I mean, look, you can look at Clayton Tune. You can see the numbers in college and think it'll be okay. Maybe he'll be like Will Levis and somehow throw 4, touchdowns. But you're really taking on a lot of risk here. So I'm going to have to put Hollywood in the start him if you need him only category this week.
We have to acknowledge there's a lot of risk here. I still think he's startable. Look, I actually was surprised Clayton Tune didn't start in week 1, that they did bring Josh Dobbs, off the bench to play. But that said, very risky here. Flex option only. And so Micah Wilson, I'm assuming this is even more risky.
Yeah, cannot do it this week with Michael Wilson. Sitting him.
Yeah, I think you definitely have to sit Wilson. He hadn't really done much the last couple of games anyways. Amari Cooper had himself a nice game. I'll say this, I'm at the point where I just can't keep doubting him. I mean, the matchup doesn't seem to really matter, does it?
No, and the problem is that Amari Cooper's been one of these guys I keep feeling like I get him wrong. Like the week where I don't think he's going to do anything, he does. And the week where I think he's going to do something, he doesn't. So just keep rolling with him at this point. He's been mostly good this year. Start him this week.
Cooper has been good even against good corners opposite him. I think he's just still a pretty solid wide receiver too every week. All right, Bucks taking on the Texans. Let's start with Mike Evans. Pretty much shut down by Buffalo a week ago. Is this a get-right game?
Yeah, I mean, Texans have not been terrible against receivers, but I don't feel like I can ever bench Mike Evans. I mean, he's still Baker's guy, I guess. He has touchdown upside, so I think you're still rolling with Mike Evans this week.
Yeah, I don't think Houston has anybody who's going to completely take him out. It's always touchdown upside. He's always kind of a solid starting option. And then Chris Godwin, I mean, it feels like he's kind of a little bit becoming more of Baker's guy. Do you think so?
Yeah, it feels like it recently, so I think he's another guy. If you got him, not a must start. If you have better options, fine, but for the most part, you're starting him.
Yeah, I think Godwin feels pretty safe to me. Like I said, he is kind of catching up to Evans in this offense, so solid start. Now, Nico Collins also has been down for a couple of weeks. Are we seeing this Houston pass offense take a step back? And are you worried about Nico?
I mean, a little bit. You got to be a little worried. They're not throwing it, 40 plus times like they were early in the year. And yeah, CJ Stroud not putting up those numbers, but I don't feel like Nico's a guy I feel like I have to start, but I still think he's a good start this week.
Well, no, you don't have to start him, but I'm getting the feeling this could be a get-right game for him. The matchup is good, not amazing, but I think that we're going to see them put the ball in his hands a lot more. So I'm going to have more confidence in Nico this week. I'm going to say he's a good start for me. And then what about Tank? Looked like it was a great spot for him last week. I mean, I guess it's just this whole offense didn't do much. Does he bounce back?
I mean, maybe he's one of these guys. You want to flex him. You want to shoot for the upside. Go for it, but just understand the risk. So if you need him, sure.
Yeah, you could stream him and see what you get. But again, if the volume isn't there, if the Texans aren't passing a ton, which they haven't been, maybe he's best left on the bench. Next, we have Washington going to New England. Let's start with Terry McLaurin. All right, going against the Pats here. What do you expect?
Yeah, not nearly as good of a matchup as last week, and I know that's weird to hear, but the Eagles have been giving up a lot to wide receivers, but he's still the number one guy here. Led the team in targets last week. He's been leading this team in targets. I think for the most part, you're starting Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, for the most part, again, the volume has been there. Just this Washington offense has been passing the ball a ton lately. This is not the same Patriots defense we saw last year, especially in the secondary. So I think he's a pretty solid number 2 wide receiver. Now, what about Jahan Dotson? This is a guy who finally came through with a big game, and I mean big, over 100 yards and a touchdown last week. Is it time to put him back in your lineup?
I'll say if you need him, you can start him. This is not the matchup that makes me feel great about putting Dotson back in my lineup. Don't expect the Commanders to be throwing it a ton in this game, so if you need him, you can start him, but man, I would be very nervous having him in my lineup still.
Yeah, that's exactly it. They threw the ball a ton, and they've been throwing the ball a ton because they've been down. I mean, are we really expecting New England to put up a big lead here? I think he's going to be reliant on a big play or a touchdown, so just this week, a risky flex. Now, Curtis Samuel did leave with a toe injury last week. Not sure if he'll give it a go in week 9. If he does, do you start him?
Probably not. I mean, wasn't really doing a whole lot in that game. Didn't do a ton the week before. I feel like maybe the Curtis Samuel kind of heater that we see every year might be coming to an end. Now dealing with a toe, I'm going to sit him.
Yeah, I'm going to sit him too. Exactly what you said. Just might have been a little flash in the pan. Now, because Samuel did leave last week, that opened the door for Jamison Crowder. That's right, Jamison Crowder is back in Washington, and he had himself a big game, 95 yards and a touchdown. Are we buying into Jamison Crowder becoming a thing?
No, I'm not. And again, this isn't like a fantastic matchup here. Desperation flex at best.
Yeah, not this week. Like I said, even if Samuel misses, that would be the main path for Crowder. But also, this matchup, I don't think he's going to get that many targets. So I'll just pass. Out in New England, there's a shakeup. Kendrick Bourne had been the leading receiver out for the season with an ACL. And Devontae Parker left with a head injury. So does that mean Demario Pop Douglas is the number one guy? And are you interested?
I mean, maybe the number one guy. Am I interested? I mean, maybe a little because it is the Commanders. It is a great matchup. So because of that, I'm going to say if you need him, you can start him.
I do think he's a flex option. Not going to rush out to force him into my lineup. But hey, this Washington secondary gives up a lot of yards to receivers. He's the number one guy there by default. And he's been pretty good. He's not a guy who gets huge plays down the field. But I think in a PPR league, he's not the worst option. Bears at the Saints. Let's talk DJ Moore. Looks like Justin Fields is not quite ready yet. We'll get another week of Tyson Bagent. So where do you put Moore this week?
I mean, if you need him, you can start him. There just is not a lot of upside here on the road against the Saints. I said it last week, you need DJ Moore to basically rip off a long run for a touchdown. Is that really what you want to bank on with your wide receiver? So only if you absolutely have to.
What did he get you last week in PPR? Like about 10 points? I think that's about what you'll get this week. That might be his ceiling, honestly, if you're hoping for a touchdown. It gets Marshawn Lattimore a lot. Yeah, so if you're just looking for a floor, sure. But otherwise, you can do better. Now, what about Chris Olave? A lot of talk about him the last couple of weeks. Getting missed on targets, him missing targets. What do you do with him now?
I'm still starting him this week. I mean, look, he's not a must start. If you have better options, fine. But had he caught that touchdown pass, we're talking about him totally differently this week. I mean, we're talking about one play that would have changed his whole outlook. So he still led the team in targets. It's not like he's not getting targeted or something. So for me, Chris Olave, in most cases, I'm still starting him.
Thing is, he should be doing so much better. The target volume is there. Derek Carr, one of the leaders in deep throws. I know some of them go to different receivers, but look, it's going to happen. It's going to click at some point. Early in the season, he was doing really well. I'm still going to keep Olave in there for the most part. Now, it did work for Rashid Shaheed, even though he barely gets on the field. Had a massive day. Are we going to throw a dart his way this week?
I mean, that's it. You want to throw a dart, go for it. He can do what he did last week, or he can do what he did the previous, 5 or 6 weeks, which is hardly anything. So you want to flex him and shoot for the upside, go ahead, but that's really the risk you're taking.
Hey, I threw him in my flex last week and he paid off. I did it a couple of weeks ago and it didn't pay off. So just know what you're getting yourself into. Big play or nothing. And then there's Michael Thomas. He's still getting some volume as well. It's the Bears. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd put him right around DJ Moore this week. Probably has a decent floor, very little ceiling. If you need him, you can start him.
That's pretty much it. Copy paste that for Michael Thomas the rest of the season. Next, we got the Colts taking on the Panthers in Carolina, looking for their second win, but they're going to have to deal with Michael Pittman. It continues to defy the odds. I'm just going to have to say I just can't doubt him anymore.
No, Pittman every week comes through. At this point, look, if you have better options, sure, but for the most part, you're probably starting Michael Pittman.
Yeah, look, I'm sure there are some rosters where you have better receivers maybe or better matchups. It's the Panthers. You definitely want to start Pittman. But again, I doubted him in two tough matchups. He came through. I'm going in. You have to start Pittman this week. And you know what? I'll take my vote of confidence another step forward. You look at underdog right now, the early line for next week for the pick'ems, 55.5 yards for Pittman. Sure, why not? He did that against a tough defense last week against the Panthers. I'm going higher. And you know what? If you're new to underdog, already talked about this, you get that new special. Lamar Jackson just getting a yard. Well, you pair it up with a Pittman pick, or you can take any other pick that you like, and then you triple your money. So that's definitely a good way to start out the week if you are a new underdog customer. And then what about Josh Downs? Also continues to produce. Is he a guy that now we kind of feel like we can't say no to?
Yeah, I can say no to him in certain cases, but I certainly think he's startable if you need him.
Yeah, he continues to get better. I will say this offense is producing because I do feel like they hired the right head coach, knows what to do. He's making it work. I'm in on Josh Downs, especially this week. And then on the Panthers side, can't say no to Adam Thielen, can we?
No, especially in this matchup against the Colts, I think you've got to start Adam Thielen.
Yep, you're definitely still starting Adam Thielen. No questions asked. What about Jonathan Mingo? I mentioned him because I see him coming on a little bit. He's getting those air yards. Is he due for a big game?
It's hard to say any wide receiver outside Adam Thielen is due for a big game. I certainly like Jonathan Mingo. I think he's well worth the stash, but I'm not ready to start him yet.
No, I don't necessarily want to start him. I will say there's buys. There's, maybe a time where you need an upside flex. Some of the guys we've mentioned. This could be the game where he produces in a way that helps your fantasy team. So risky, but streamable. Giants going to take on the Raiders. So it looks like Daniel Jones is back, which is good. They don't have to go to their third string quarterback. Does that mean that Wan'Dale Robinson is startable?
Yeah, that's as high as I can go. He's startable. It's a good matchup. It's Daniel Jones, so at least he'll throw the football, but not a lot of upside here. If you need a floor, sure.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't know if any of these receivers even have a ceiling at this point, so startable only because it's the Raiders. And then we can't call Davante Adams a no-doubter anymore because just continues to put up mediocre lines. So at this point, are you going so far as to bench Davante?
I don't know if I'm there yet. I know it doesn't feel good. Man, it would be really hard for me to bench Davante Adams unless I have great options. So I think for the most part, I'm giving him another chance.
I'm going to keep him in my lineup. Look, I'm going to remember that they had backup quarterback for two of those bad games for him. Garoppolo back, but really tough matchup against Detroit on the road. This is a good spot. It's at home. It's the Giants. I'm still starting Davante Adams. And then Jacoby Myers. He's not Davante, but I kind of feel the same way. I think he's still solid.
Yeah, still a solid start. It's a better matchup this week. I'm pretty much rolling with him in most cases.
All right, now Cowboys at the Eagles. Very important game for these two teams. We know CeeDee Lamb is back to elite status. A.J. Brown is competing with Tyreek Hill for best receiver in fantasy. But then there's the other guys. What about Brandon Cooks? He did score a touchdown last week. This offense is looking better, maybe.
I will say this week you can consider them. The Eagles give up a ton of points to wide receivers. They gave up 4 passing touchdowns to 4 different players last week to the Commanders. Cooks has scored 2 games in a row. So if you need him, you can start him.
All right. Finally converted you there. Now, look, hey, if Jamison Crowder can have a big game, why can't Brandon Cooks? I don't expect a huge game, but I do think he is somebody you can flex. And then Devontae Smith finally had what we can call a big game, pretty good game here. What about against the Cowboys, though?
Yeah, not nearly as good of a spot here. I think for the most part, you're probably still starting him, but don't expect the same result you got last week.
No, very different matchup, but again, you'd have to have some really elite receivers ahead of him to consider benching Devontae anywhere. So pretty much you're starting him. Bills taking on the Bengals, so another potential shootout between good teams. What about Gabe Davis here? Coming off another really big game, and he got a ton of targets too. It wasn't just like one or two big plays.
Yeah, Gabe Davis, another guy, seemed to just continually get wrong. I think I got him right once this year, but you never know what you're going to get with Gabe Davis. He can do what he did last week and help you win, or he can do what he did the 2 weeks before and help you lose. So, yeah, if you're feeling risky, put him in your lineup. Hope he goes off.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really know here, right? But I will say I feel like he's been more consistent, much more consistent than last year, and getting a lot more targets his way just looks better. I think he's pretty much a solid wide receiver 3 risk, but a ton of upside. And then now we're actually talking about Khalil Shakir. Came through with his best game of his career. So is he someone we now consider with some of these other flex options?
Again, I don't want to just chase one game like this. I know the week before he kind of came on a little bit too, but you got Diggs there. I mean, maybe Gabe goes off. Now you got Kincaid in the mix. I'm going to sit him this week.
Yeah, one thing that I pointed out is, sure, he caught 6 passes, 92 yards, but he only got 6 targets. He caught them all, but that was 4th highest on the team. He's still going to be low man here in terms of target share in the pecking order, so desperation, like a deep league flex. And then Cincinnati, T. Higgins, looks good, looks healthy. Is he a guy you're pretty much just starting?
Yeah, still not ready to put him in that, I feel great, just start him every week, but this should be a high-scoring game, should have a lot of points. It's not Baker Mayfield the Bills are facing this week, it's Joe Burrow, who looks fantastic, so I think for the most part, you're starting T. Higgins.
Yeah, still a guy that's hard to bench. I will say, remember last week against the Bills, thought Mike Evans would go off, he didn't. He got kind of shut down. I mean, not going to assume T. Higgins is having a big game, but he still has so much potential. He's still solid. And the last game of the week will be the Chargers at the Jets. Jets pulling out a victory. They're at home. Got a really good defense. What does that mean for Josh Palmer?
Yeah, not liking Josh Palmer this week. Re-injured the knee. I know he returned, but you got to wonder how healthy the knee is. Very tough matchup against the Jets. I'm not starting Josh Palmer.
Yeah, I'd say there's room for the number 2 receiver against the Jets to thrive because the number 1 guy gets the sauce treatment. But like I said, Palmer's banged up. He's not the most high-end wide receiver 2. I think at this matchup, you got to sit him. And then Quentin Johnston, I mean, he had his best game, 5 catches, 50 yards. Do you think he's coming on?
Maybe, but I'm not going to put him in my lineup against the Jets. No chance.
I'm not buying into it. Look, I'm not a QJ hater or anything like that, but this was because Palmer was banged up, Joe Everett banged up. They passed the ball a lot. I'm not buying into it. I'm definitely not starting him this week. What about Garrett Wilson? Another 100-yard game. Is he a guy that we now have to strongly consider?
Yeah, I liked him last week against the Giants. I like him even more this week against the Chargers. I mean, not a must start. Obviously, if you have really good options, fine. But I think he's a very strong start this week.
Yeah, Chargers have been giving up points to receivers. You figure the Jets are going to have to pass the ball quite a bit. So I'm going to put him potentially wide receiver 2 this week. Those are our takes on all the wide receivers that you need to know about for week 9. Don't worry, we got you covered for running back, quarterback, tight end, every position that you need to know. Buy low, waiver wire advice, and more. It's all right here on this week's video playlist.